Welcome, everybody, to this week's May Checks It discussion group call for tactical sovereignty. Like I always say, this wonderful Sunday, the first day of the week, not the seventh, the first day, therefore, also not the Sabbath. And I just wanted to kind of have a short call this evening, and I'll leave things open if anybody wants to ask anything or pipe up with anything, feel free to do so. Absolutely. Um, I've left mics open. If there's a little bit too much background noise or anything, though, I will mute them if needed. I think that one of the most important things that people can do when they get out and really start learning anything is paying attention to one, not just where information is coming from, but also realizing that not everybody might be as informed as you think they are. You might be listening to people that aren't informed any more than you are on the topic that you're trying to find things out about. And when I bring up information, I've mentioned this before, but um, there's several different levels to it. And general information, just info in general, is easy to come by. You can go online and you can find 1,000 recipes for apple pie. It doesn't mean it's the best recipe. In fact, some of them may be very faulty. They may have left out one or two very important ingredients. And the same thing goes along with any other kind of information you're looking for. It may be generally correct, and it also could be totally, very much incorrect. And that's the way a lot of the three-letter agencies look at it as well. And they're very particular about what they get. And what they're really looking for is knowledge. Knowledge is the best thing because that's stuff that can be researched, it can be backed up, it can be determined whether it's factual or not. And then they've got their third level, which is intel or intelligence, which by nature is generally secret. It's normally only kept to a very small core of people. You'll find, for instance, within big companies, even things are always very compartmentalized. Not everybody knows what everybody else is doing. If you're working in a company at a desk, you might not know what the guy at the desk behind you does, or at least any of the real even specifics of it, or the person across the room, let alone down the hall in another room or on another floor or in another building in another state. I mean, it's, it, intelligence is really kept very compartmentalized because sometimes it could be very dangerous in the hands of the wrong people if they don't know how to use it or they use it in nefarious ways. But on the surface level, everybody's really just finding a lot of what you call information, info. And I posted something several days ago regarding somebody that has kind of been in the limelight quite a bit. And one of the things that I paid attention to starting here a couple years ago regarding this person, and I'm not really going to point them out because this really isn't about calling out certain people or pointing fingers at anybody. That's not what this is about at all. Um, some people may know who I'm talking about, some may not. I'll just call him David. He's from Leicester, England, and I'll leave it at that. But when I first started researching things, he was one of the first people I came across, and I probably didn't listen or read any of his information for more than 10 minutes before I was like, yeah, something just rubbed me wrong. It didn't seem quite right. And it was about at that time anyway where I was choosing to start being a little more particular about where I was trying to find my research at and who I was trying to find it from. and deciding really to go more towards the source, you know, for information, go to the heart of the matter to really get the true knowledge or the true the true intelligence about what I was wanting to learn. And so much poor information is being shared around, and much of the issues that we are all looking for, we're trying to find answers for. And so, like I said, here a couple years ago, it kind of piqued my interest to pay a little more attention to David, because it was around that time that a great purge was starting to happen regarding social media. And a lot of big names were being erased. They were kind of disappearing online. If you went to search for them, you wouldn't find them. A lot of people started going to other platforms for that reason. And it's even been suggested to me, to check out other platforms. And I have. I looked at a lot of the other platforms, and one of the things that I found that really stuck out to me was that it seemed like the only people you were communicating with on those other platforms, I'll say like Telegram, for instance, and it's not like other social media where you can kind of just scroll across the board and look for different things you want to find. You're basically placed in certain groups or certain links. And so you're only going to be getting communication with those other people that are in that same group or on that same link, which means you're really just in an echo chamber. You're amongst a bunch of other people that you may or may not know that all really have the same opinion. You're not hearing anything new. And that was really a good way of isolating people, say, for instance, within, if you want to call it the truth movement, all right, was to put them in their own little boxes, put them in their own little echo chamber. I would compare that to, you know, a child at home gets in trouble or something, and mom and dad says, go to your bedroom, uh, go to your isolation chamber. And I see that's exactly really what happens when people go to many of these other platforms is, you're stuck in a box. You're not able to really reach out to anybody outside of that room or that link. And at the same time, you're also not able to disseminate information or knowledge or intel to anybody that is not a part of that group or that link, or that's not in that room. And so I really did not care for that idea that was being provided. But and I noticed that when all these other people were being taken down and people were starting to head to these other sites, that I wasn't seeing David taken down. He was still very prominent, say, for instance, on YouTube. And really is not hard to find there today. Many of the people that have been removed over the past couple of years for one reason or another, people can't even go with YouTube, for instance, and post up a recording from that individual or do an interview with that individual. It'll immediately get struck because that person was pretty much scrubbed. Well, towards the very end of their big, culling of the herd on YouTube, uh, David kind of was taken down. Now, I really don't know. I never looked to see if he had his own YouTube channel or not, but I know that there's still interviews with him that have been still being put up, which I find it kind of interesting. One of the things that people need to realize nowadays is that anybody that gains any kind of notoriety or fame or gets any glimpse of the limelight, they're really not there because of a level of talent or a level of knowledge or anything like that. They're there because they're allowed to be there. The powers that be are allowing their voice to get out. And so you have to stop and think, why is their voice being allowed to get out? And I listened to a recent recording from him that was put up that somebody had shared with me today. And I knew that when I posted something, and what I posted really wasn't about just him specifically, but it's this idea that these voices that are allowed to stay out there, we have to stop and think, are they controlled opposition? Are they putting out information actually that's really faulty and can lead you in the wrong direction, which the powers that be really don't mind at all, especially as long as it kind of keeps your eyes maybe off from them and doesn't offer you any solutions when it comes to dealing with them. So anyway, like I said, I listened today to a recording that was shared with me because, yeah, I knew there'd be some kickback when I posted what I did. Like I said, it wasn't about him. It's about a general idea. But I know that there are lots and lots of people that follow him, lots and lots of people that like him. Um, for some reason, it seems like in Western culture that when people in the West hear people with a, say, for instance, a British accent, somehow I think there's a level of intelligence there or something. I'm really not sure how that works. So I listened to the recording, and what I listened to was probably pushing half an hour, which would be cumulatively probably more than I've listened to him at all right? Because the majority of what he puts out and what many other people puts out kind of reaches a level of crazy, all right? And one of the reasons why certain voices are allowed to be heard is because they will lead people in the direction of crazy. They have friends that recommend somebody. They see this person's got, you know, hundreds of thousands, whatever, followers, whatever the case may be. So they think there must be some credibility there. And what ultimately ends up happening is that these people that are kind of starting to reach out and try and learn things and find things out get taken into a level of crazy that even boggles their mind. And they're like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. This is so way out there. And what it does is it chases them right back to the mainstream narrative, which, I mean, that's a perfect psychological plan. And it's worked a lot. I've heard a lot of people in conversations, they'll bring up one issue or another, and the general public will normally just trip out and be like, what are you smoking? Give me some of what you got, you know, and they totally dismiss it, and dismiss that information. And so that's actually perfect for the powers that be out there, is to have someone that spreads information that's faulty, that will lead people right back to going back to their Fox News or CNN or PMSNBC or whatever, you know, their favorite go-to channel is for news entertainment, because there is no news knowledge out there anymore. It's just news entertainment. Whatever keeps the ratings up, and that is what they're going to have on the airways. They're a business. Bottom line, it's a business tactic. And that's one of the things that he brought up in the discussion that I heard today that he was having, is that everything is really just business and it's just commerce and commercial. And he was alluding to, for instance, statutory law, and statutory law being used to, well, he said the source of it was to bring in admiralty and to handle commerce and contracts. And that was his claim of to where the source of statutory law comes from. And I hear a lot of people say that statutes aren't law, you know. Otherwise, they'd be called law instead of statutes. Well, to clarify that just a little bit for people, the real source of statutes in the United States or at the United States comes from what's called public law. You'll find toward at the end of a statute, you can find a source for it, and it'll say, public law number whatever. And you go to that public law, which is what something was written by Congress, and you'll read the whole public law, and it will identify different aspects of what they were trying to reference and what that law is about. And not every aspect of that law may be applicable to a situation, but a portion of it might be. And so that's why they go and they will turn it into a statute. They'll take a chunk of that public law out and it'll become part of a statute. And the public law is the source of where the statutory law comes from. He made a comment that the real law they wanted to try and take away was common law. And I see a lot of different arguments between people and confusion regarding what public law is. Any sources that I've gone to and looked at for a definition of common law has said that it is treaties and judicial decisions. And in the flavor of that, and I've also heard from other teachers that say that the common law is a law that's common to the land, which is basically a good way of summing that up, the treaties and judicial decisions. His statement that was that common law means do no harm. And a lot of people have the idea that as long as, who did I harm? Bring forward the party that I harmed. And that you have the right, to face your accuser. And yes, you do. But not always does there have to be a harm. I'm sorry to tell people that, and people might kind of trip about it, but that's just the case. Go back to when you were being raised at home. If the rule in the home, how it goes in the home, dad says, hey, as long as you're under this roof, you follow my rules. Well, you know, say you stay out, 20 minutes after curfew, and that worries mom and dad. And the next day when you get up, mom and dad decide they're going to have a talk with you, and why were you late last night, and et cetera, et cetera. Your curfew time is 10 o'clock. You didn't get in until 10:20. Of course, mom and dad were worrying immensely during that 20 minutes, I'm sure. But was anybody harmed? No, there was no harm. But does a judgment get passed down on you? Of course. You may get grounded for, say, the next week or two. And you can kick and scream as a child and say, well, where's the injured party? There's no harm done. It's the same exact situation. It's putting yourself in a position of danger, for instance. That's what the parents are trying to prevent. Same situation, say, in the household, there is a rule that you don't smoke, you're only 14, 15 years old. What are you doing smoking anyway? There's no smoking in our household. And when you turn 18 and want to move out, if you choose to smoke, fine. Probably especially if you're in a Southern Baptist household, that's definitely a rule you're going to be hearing. Are you harming somebody by going out back behind the garage and smoking a cigarette? No, you're not. Is it a law of your house? Yes, it is. Will the parents enforce it? Probably so. And it's the same way that comes with the state, you run a stop sign. Why? It was late at night. I live in a very unpopulated area. I kind of rolled through. I saw there was no cars coming clearly from either direction, but the officer still pulled you over and gave you a ticket. You're looking for an injured party? Hey, yeah, well, you're not necessarily going to find one. There isn't one. You just broke one of those rules of the state, just like you lived under when you're in mommy and daddy's house, whether it was with the curfew or not smoking, whatever the case may be. So I think people get really confused on things such as, common law. It's really what is common to a people of an area. Um, and where you live, that area, that's very specific when it comes to common law. If you lived in the Middle East, Sharia law would be your common law. I mean, not so sure how many people would enjoy that, but we have to realize what it really comes down to. And that's why it's called, an unwritten law, because it's just the basic principles that a society follows. That's your common law. So I find some of these things that people bring up and they try and teach and tell you that, as long as you're not causing harm to anybody, that, you have no jurisdiction over you. There is no jurisdiction over you. And one of the things that he and others bring up as well, which I find very confusing, is they turn you into a corporate person, and that you've got to go into court as the living, breathing, bleeding, flesh and blood man or woman. Well, I'm sorry, but the judge knows that you are a living man, living woman. Prosecution knows that you're a living man, living woman. It's really a matter of capacity. And when I say capacity, I mean how you are operating, the hat that you're wearing, and the hat that they see you as wearing, which grants jurisdiction as being a representative of what they created at birth, which is that legal entity. Um, it's depicted by its registration. Its registration is a certificate of live birth. Um, Even the writers of UCC 9 have stated the same thing, that that's what that is. Had somebody actually in the group, I think in the past couple of days, asking that question. And so I, shared with them what the UCC writers, UCC 9 writers say. And that's what they're telling you. So, yeah, they just see you as acting in a particular capacity, and that is the capacity of representation. You're representing something that they created. Everybody else in that same room is no different. They are all in a representative capacity as well. Whether it's defense counsel, they're representing your legal entity as well, should you choose to hire one. Prosecution is acting in a capacity of representing the state or the county. The same with the judge, same with the clerk of courts. Everybody there is acting in the capacity of being a representative. Everything in the system is about status, standing, and capacity. And that's kind of the holy trinity of the state and how things operate. And I just really, I think, wanted to leave it with that this evening. There's a whole lot more that could go into, but it's really not worth it. I mean, I think we just need to pay close attention when we hear different things, you know, pull out a dictionary or two or three. Pull out a legal dictionary if it's dealing with a legal situation. Look and see what that term really means. That's very important. You're not going to comprehend what's being said unless you comprehend the meanings of the words, because words have meanings, and that is very, very important. And so the most important thing is to realize what those meanings are and what they're talking about. Otherwise, you're clueless. Otherwise, you're really listening to a different language or reading a different language without even realizing you are. And that can be the worst deception. And that deception is a deception that not necessarily is just being played on you, but you're agreeing to it and playing it on yourself as well, because you're not doing your due diligence and going and researching these things and finding out what they really mean. And that's what needs to be done. If you're going to enter into a foreign area, a foreign land, you're going to go to another state to visit, what do? You pull out a map, You take a look around, you see where you're going, where you're heading to in that state. What are the routes that take you there? What are the routes that are best to bring you back? Same thing in the legal community, same thing in life. We need to know what direction we're moving in, the best way to get there, the best way to get back from there, which would also mean to, get out of being in a bad situation, unfortunately, if you find yourself there. And I think I'm going to leave it with that. I don't know if my co host showed up. If he wants to say anything, he can feel free. Lines are open. Just do a double check. Anybody else want to bring up anything? Feel free. Otherwise, like I tell people every week, the best thing to do is learn who you really are, where you're really from, and where you're really at, because everything lies on comprehending those three things. Thanks, guys. Have a great night. See you next Sunday night.